Hey guys, greetings from the great state of Michigan. I hope everyone's break's going well. I just wanted to show you guys a little bit about how to use the form helpers and the link helpers and how RESTful Routes works with these two tools because it's super effective and it can also be super confusing if you don't understand what's going on. So let's just take a look at my screen right now. This is more or less the same format I want your project to be. It's not exactly the same, but for all intents and purposes of this lecture it is. Notice this is just my rough outline of this project. So notice how I have a link here that says delete this stuff, and if you look in the lower right hand corner it says localhost 3000/stuff/5. Sorry if the dogs are barking too loud. We have two young crazy puppies that are crazy. So I go to this link, I'm going to inspect it, and you can see here it says href stuff/5 data method delete rel no follow. I have no idea what that means, but this wasn't made by me. This was made by Rails. So let's go here and see what it did. So let's go to index.html.erb. This is where I display all of each of my stuffs. Notice I have bacon, hoodie, and a chair. I'm very inspired by the things around me. But this is what I wanted you guys to see. It says link to edit this stuff, and then notice this is a function. This is link to, so this is a builder. This builds an anchor tag. This builds an A tag for you, and it builds it by using the following parameters. The first parameter is what you want the link to read, just the context of the link. Notice how it says edit this stuff and delete this stuff. Edit this stuff, delete this stuff. This is a function because it's got parentheses. It takes two parameters. So, well, it takes actually more than that. It takes a bunch of them if you want, but this is the basics. So what this says is go to edit this stuff, and what is the actual URL I want it to go to? Edit stuff path with stuff.id. This is actually pretty interesting. How does this work? Well, what Rails does when you use RESTful routing is it generates the routes for you, and it generates a function you can call that's a shortcut to the route. So instead of putting, I have I gotta open a new terminal. Rails. 2 clicks with Windows 8, by the way, guys. 2 clicks. Oh, I didn't open a new window. 4 clicks. Right click, open new window. Windows 8's not bad, huh? So cd, links, forms and stuff, rake routes. My mom's yelling in the background. It's season's greetings. Okay, so notice how it says stuff's edit. So instead of doing this path/stuff/id/edit, instead of hard coding that path in a string, they actually give you this function that says edit underscore stuff. So if you didn't know this, what you can do is you can say edit underscore stuff underscore path, like I did right here, and take a parameter. And what this parameter will take is for each of my stuffs, I'm going to get all my stuffs in my database, and I'm calling each one of them stuff. So I just pass in the parameter of the ID of the particular stuff, whichever thing I'm editing, and then that will be how Rails identifies that this is the thing I want to edit. So, I mean, forgive me for saying stuffs so much. I call this project stuff RS or things RS. So notice how this one takes me to the 5, this one takes me to 4, this one takes me to 1. And why is that? Is because I went to my database in my controller, which I'll show you just now. And in the index method, all I do is go to my controller and I say, get all the stuffs from my database. And in my index page, using that information I got from my database, I do something with each stuffs. I do it with each stuff. And each stuff has its own unique ID. It's just like saying fetch all from my database, just like PHP. And so what this function does, edit stuff path, is it knows, Rails knows which URL I'm going to want to go to by using the path from the RESTful routes right here. Edit stuff. This is the path it generates. This is the path helper. So edit underscore stuff underscore path will be the generator for the link to this particular URL. And how does it know which ID to go to? Is because the path function takes as a parameter an ID. And so this stuff has its own unique ID because each database entry has its own ID. So that's how the link to thing works. It's very helpful for Rails, especially when you're using RESTful, because you can use these path shortcuts where you don't have to hard code the URLs. And by hard code the URLs, I mean something like this, where I would have to say, oops, this is my server. I would have to say stuffs/id/edit. I would say /stuff/ whatever the ID was. So I'd have to actually concatenate on, have to say stuff.id plus, then you concatenate on the rest of it, edit, which is a pain in the butt, right? So instead of having to do that nasty hard coding string with, concatenating on a random integer, you just use the stuff's path helper. You say edit stuff underscore path, then you pass in the unique identifier. So same thing here. Link to delete the stuff path, method delete. Oh, this is crazy. So notice that when you want to do a delete action, the HTTP method has to be a delete method. You don't really know how to do that just by hard coding it, right? So what you do here is you say link to delete this stuff path, stuff ID. Oh, well, I'm using the same helper. So let's go and check what the helper route was. So stuff, notice how it doesn't say one for put or delete. It just means it takes stuff here and uses the put and delete method for stuff. Depending on the HTTP request method, it will generate the right route. So if the request were to be a get and I said stuff underscore path, it would get the ID I showed it. If I wanted to edit it, it would be the put format with the ID. It would be stuff underscore path with the ID I wanted to edit, and I would say method put. With delete, I put method delete. So if that doesn't confuse you, you'll understand. I hope you aren't confused. You understand that you can pass into this function, this link to function, the HTTP request you want to make when you click that link, which is why when I go here now, it says data method equals delete. So it might be hard to understand this just by watching this video and having me point it out for you. Really, you need to use this in your own project and build routes and build kind of just workflow with it. It's not going to totally, I know this isn't totally going to make this super clear to you, but it should be a good starting point. So I'm using the link to function here. This is a Rails function that takes parameters and generates HTML content for you. So once again, edit this stuff is just what I want the link to say. The first parameter of this function is just what I want the link to read as, what I want the blue letters to look like, to be very basic. Purple after you click on them. And then the second parameter is the actual URL you want to put in there. So I could actually just put here, watch. I'll do link to, then we'll say Google is here. And then we'll say www.http. Let's do that. http://www.google.com. Save that, and then, oops. What do they not like? Unexpected wedge, expecting on line 8. What did I do? Oh, I didn't close my tag. Sorry, guys. The only problem with ERB. Google is here. Where does it say? It says google.com. I click it. Holy cow, it's at Google. So that's how you use the link to helper. So let's just take that out of my project because it's just totally throwing off my karma. Now, the next thing I want you to use is a form helper. So I go here. Let's look at this. Form tag. So a form tag is another Rails function. You say form tag, and it takes as a parameter a couple different things. So what you say is the path you want to go to. So notice how it says /stuffs. Well, now that I mentioned it, I could use the Rails helper. I could use the routing helper. So I just want to go to /stuffs, so I would say stuffs underscore path. And since it's a post, they know that when I do this, I'll just say stuffs path. And since they know it's a post, they'll know that if I were to say stuffs underscore path with a post request, it would go to the create method. It would make a new stuff for me. If it were to be a get request, it would go to the index page. It would go to the index method. So that's how you differentiate using the same URL, right? Depending on your request, your URL will do different things, even though it's the same URL. So stuffs underscore path, new stuff underscore path, edit stuff underscore path with an ID that you pass, and then stuff underscore path passing an ID and changing your HTTP request will generate all of your routes. So using all this left-hand column information, you can just add an underscore path onto the end of it, and that will generate the appropriate URL depending upon the request you use. And all of the Rails helpers allow you to say what type of request specifically you want. So now notice I changed this from the hard-coded URL to the stuffs underscore path method. Let's see if it makes anything break. So I refresh this. Nothing's wrong. I click to add stuff. Name. Water bottle. I have a water bottle next to me. Category, hydration. Image link. I originally was going to have you guys link an image to it. You don't really have to, but I'll show you how I use it just because it's the holidays and I'm feeling, we'll say water bottle. Oops, come back. I forget water bottle. Forget URL goes right. All your Google search goes right into the URL. So just go here. My internet's been really, really slow. It's not just the dojo. I'm really scared it's the drivers in my laptop. But anyway, you're just going to use, you just poke in a URL and it would just make an image tag. When I generate the content, it says stuff, and source gives you stuff.image. Image is the attribute that I give the link to. Anyway, image will just say ttt.com. Not going to work. Add more stuff. And it still works. And now notice how the path would have been here, and it should have been an image, but my internet's been crawling. So let's look at this form helper. This form helper says generate a form tag. This is where I want the URL to go, which is why I use my URL helper, stuffs underscore path method post. So now that I know how to use this stuff, look, stuffs underscore path post is going to take me to stuffs.create, which is exactly where I want this form data to be sent. Now look here, label underscore tag, and then you pass it a parameter that's a hash. You pass it a hash. The name is just going to be what you want the name to be for your label tag. So name is going to be the name, the input whose name is name. So when you say label tag, this generates a label for the actual text input. So text underscore field underscore tag generates an input type text, and in this parameter, this is where you pass the name attribute. So I know they're both named name, but let's use another one for example then. So this is going to be the text, the input type text form element, and your name is going to be category. You know how you give it the name equals, and that's how the post refers to it with PHP. Same deal with Rails. This is how you pass in what you want to name it. And the labels just, you know, labels. Then the submit tag, this just makes an input type equals submit, add more stuff. This is just Rails' way of making a form for you. It's kind of less effort to hard code your forms at first, but once you realize what Rails does for you with the forms, like notice when I go to add stuff, inspect element, it generates actually a whole bunch of security features for me. So it gives me, it should actually give me, yeah, it gives you an authenticity token, which gets encrypted with some method. It's just a Rails thing. It's very nice of them. It's just a hidden div with stuff like this. And then it just generates HTML label for name, name. ID equals name, name equals name, type equals text. That's all it does. But what's important is that just by passing these parameters, Rails knows what URLs to go to. If you use Rails effectively, you'll never hard code a URL. You'll never say string slash something slash method slash parameters. You'll never have to do that with Rails if you use RESTful correctly and you use all the helpers. So yeah, you just say form tag do, and then at the end of it you put end. You can check out the documentation for this. On the platform we tell you to use simple form, which is an even more kind of streamlined way to use forms. We haven't talked about that yet, so just try to use Rails basic form tags. Simple form is a gem. So I just want you to use the native Ruby helper form so you can do form tag. I appreciate you guys using that as opposed to getting the gem. And don't hard code your forms. This is a way to learn how to use RESTful even better. And then notice on all of the methods that don't render a URL for me, that don't render a view rather, I just say redirect to underscore to stuffs path, stuffs path, stuffs path. So what this does is it just changes my URL. It refreshes the page and does a redirect. So learn how to use that. And yeah, here's a brief look at my controller. I didn't even use the new method because I kind of squeezed 2 routes into one. But for you guys, I want you to use all 7 different methods. This was just a quick video to maybe teach you guys how to use the form helper and the URL helper a little bit, the link underscore to and the form underscore tag. You use that in tandem with the path thing. I hope you guys understand what I'm saying by stuffs underscore path. So this left-hand column, you put this word underscore path and pass whatever parameters you want to it, and it knows how to go to this URL correctly, as long as you specify the request method. Now, by default, if you don't specify what kind of method you want, Rails is going to think you're doing a GET request. So unless you specify post or put or delete, it's going to think you're doing a GET request. That's just kind of a good thing to know. So yeah, feel free to email me if you guys have any more questions. I just wanted to show you how to use this stuff and how to make a very powerful app very quickly. And I did the scaffold exercise this morning, and it literally does all of this for you in like 3 lines of code. Not even code, just lines in the terminal. Rails G scaffold followed by all of the input fields you want for your model, and it pretty much makes this project for you, along with like errors and validation. It's crazy. But don't do the scaffold until you do this with hard-coded Rails stuff. Or not hard-coded, but just manually coded Rails stuff. Okay, that's enough blabbering. Everyone have a good break.